Seasonal wipes. Some people despise them, and some have a severe case of Stockholm Syndrome. Do they have a purpose? And if so, can they be misused? Let's talk about it. Just to be clear, right off the bat, this isn't going to be a wipes are bad video. This is an honest discussion as to why they're used, how they could be used, and more importantly, how they're overused. So this topic seems like it's always coming up whenever a new extraction game comes to the table. Naturally, a lot of comparisons to Escape from Tarkov will be made, since it is the pioneer game within the genre and remains the most populated. But even the most hardcore Escape from Tarkov fan will admit that Battlestate Games doesn't always get things right, and that's putting it lightly. With that being said, there's no reason to assume this is one of the things they got right. Despite this, there's never any shortage of people defending the need for wipes, as if there's no other option. Now, if you take the time to sit down and talk to these players about what keeps them playing Tarkov, it's not all that hard to understand why they defend wipes. Based on what I've consistently found is that the funnest time to play Escape from Tarkov is during the beginning of a wipe. And during my time playing the Cycle Frontier, I can honestly say I fully understand this sentiment. Everyone starts off on even ground, having a game-wide arms race where the gear that is meant to be rare and valuable still is, where the losses still sting and the gains still feel great. You can rightly say this is almost peak extraction gameplay. But this feeling is temporary. Eventually, you have enough gear to afford losses, and because of that, you no longer feel the tension that keeps you playing. The potential gain means little because you have plenty anyways. And eventually, everyone has the same gear and you run out of things to do. And then the familiar mental slump of wait till the next wipe happens. The wipe is defended because on face value, it is perceived as the thing that maintains the fun factor of the game. So much so that the question of whether you're still playing the game takes the form of, are you playing this wipe? Now, don't get me wrong, if the game is in early access where the development is ongoing and in dramatic fashion, wipes don't just make sense, they're a necessity. Devs need to test features that dramatically change the nature of the game, and the only way that you can see if these changes have their intended effect is to see the player base tackle the game from the start. So for major updates that alter the very nature of the game, I can see its use being critically necessary. Maybe it's because I haven't spent years playing these games, but I do not accept the premise that the wipe is what's creating the fun factor. Look at it this way, critical issues with the game's design are not being fixed. So when those problems make the game untenable, instead of fixing the issues, the devs hit the reset button. The two major issues I'm talking about are gear saturation and lack of content. Since all extraction games economies generate more gear than it removes from play, on a long enough timeline, even the most powerful and rare gear will become commonplace. And no matter how much content a dev team plans out, it will only be a matter of time before the majority of the player base finishes it and has nothing to do. Frankly, what's more likely is that these players get bored well before they finish that content. With regards to content, the basic gameplay loop that extracts have is a great foundation, but it lacks permanence. There isn't any escalation to shoot for. Ranked modes usually aren't a good fit for this kind of genre. Drawing from my own experience, the Cycle Frontier had a set of endgame missions that were repeatable, high risk, and rewarded with high value loot used for various things. But by the time you reached these missions, you were so flush with money and gear that the rewards were no longer large motivators. What generally happened was players who more or less completed enough missions to unlock most of the weapons would just launch into maps, pushing towards gunshots. Naturally, this can get tiring rather quickly, but players who were dedicated enough to get to this point early in a season would gladly do so because they enjoyed the combat. From what I understand, mid to late wipe in Escape from Tarkov isn't much different. Regarding the economic side of things, a game must find a way to stop gear inflation. For the uninitiated, this is the process by which mid to high level gear increases in circulation to the point where they no longer have value. Simply jacking up the cost in both purchasing and maintenance only serves to make it prohibitive to all but the most dedicated of players. Even still, the process is slowed but not stopped. There has to be a mechanism that removes the gear from circulation in sufficient numbers that it combats this inflation. Now, to be fair, these are not small issues. If left unattended, these will ruin games. So you might be asking, if wipes mitigate these issues, then why not just keep using wipes? Well, for starters, it's not the only possible solution to these issues, just the easiest. And it doesn't really solve the issues because they keep happening. Wipes likely started out as a temporary measure, but they have become a band-aid that never came off. The issues don't go away. We're basically only allowed to play the game at its peak enjoyment in cycles rather than enjoy it continuously. The biggest negative to wipes is that it prohibits player acquisition considerably. It is an almost unheard of feature outside of extracts and some survival games. So the likelihood of a new player not knowing it is high. Consider a possible new player inquiring into the game, either Escape from Tarkov or the Cycle Frontier when it was around. Statistically, this new player will try playing the game not during the beginning of a wipe. They're likely outgeared, and on top of this, they're also starting off in a genre that isn't at all forgiving. If they don't flat out quit, one of the first things they will be told when trying to learn more about the game is, quote, come back when the next wipe happens, or some variation of this. There's two problems with this. This potential new player is being actively told not to play the game, to, quote, come back. Many times, players who stop playing a game don't come back if it's for an extended period of time, especially if they haven't put in a good amount of hours already. In this communication, they've also been told about wipes. So they've just been told the game is only fun and balanced for a small window of time, and all of their progress will be gone because of no fault of their own. Now, the average player plays for about an hour a day. You've convinced them to play a game where they lose things when they die, not just what they gained from the raid, but what they brought in, which means you've gotten them to spend what little time they have on a game where they can easily go negative on a given night. It's a hard sell, but hey, you got them in the door, so that's the good news. Now they find out that at their current pace, even if they started at a, quote, ideal time, they won't likely come close to finishing the content available, or any meaningful progress for that matter, before they get reset again. This puts a serious cap on new player acquisition. Once potential players find this out, they'll likely not even give the game a second look. And I think that the number of players lost before they start is a lot more than most extract players are willing to acknowledge. I personally believe that an extract game that can make an endgame loop balanced enough could solve both major issues that the wipe is just a band-aid for. Now, I'm not claiming I have found the best solution or the only solution, but here are just a couple of examples on how the issues can be addressed. But before I get into all of that, if you're still here, there's a good chance I'm entertaining you. You should consider subscribing. I appreciate your consideration, and now back to the video. The major contributors to these problems are the most active players of the community, which is ironic. These players will be the first to run through content, stack up gear, and start the cycle of issues. But if you give them an outlet to channel this excitement for your game, they can be the solution instead. You could create an endgame that encourages these players to play with and against each other, make the cost of participation high, and give worthwhile rewards. These rewards would need to be things that the player wants and don't just perpetuate the same issues, so they would need to be non-economic in nature. My personal preference would be clans or guilds. The reason I'd personally go that route is that by every metric available, players play games longer when they have friends who also play said game. Making a system that allows players who are energetic about the game to find each other, organize, and excel in will do a lot to help player retention. I would imagine that they would have their own battlegrounds, built specifically for this in mind, with spoils of war that cannot be turned around and used in general circulation. Finding a way to funnel gear from the general pool to these battlegrounds and ways to remove from circulation would be key. A couple of examples are tagging gear captured or acquired in this way as only usable in the same fashion, have a clan stash, and or donate to the clan gear to dissolve for some kind of clan XP. In order to prevent the same two issues from happening within said clan system would largely depend on the game itself. For this, it would actually be appropriate to have seasonal wipes for the clans themselves, centered around various rewards and competitions. To be clear, this will not wipe the players' accounts. You could have leaderboards with ego boosting rewards, you could give incentives for clans to recruit lower level players, have a higher cap on the size of player groups for battlegrounds, you can even introduce whole new mechanics only used in these places like clan-owned vehicles or even crew-served weapons, for example. This also opens the door for possible content to add to the game that won't break the flow of the general lobbies. And of course, you could introduce prestiging that would allow players to voluntarily wipe for various ego boosting rewards. Again, the balance of this could be worked out based on the needs of the individual game, so it'd be hard to generalize. The devs could even sell the use of custom servers, where the communities can tailor their experience to their preferences. Have a weekly or monthly wipe if you so choose. The difference would be that the potential new players have the vanilla experience to draw from, while also having the additional options. This would open the door to a wider variety of players, which will result in the general growth of the game. The alternatives to wipes admittedly seem way more difficult to manage, but do offer significantly more upsides with less downsides, so there's that. And I do recognize in order to balance a clan system I put forth, in order to replace using wipes, I recommended possibly using wipes. This irony is not lost on me. That use case, however, is very different, but that's not the point. This is, periodic and seasonal wipes may very well be needed in some extract games. However, they are not a given and they shouldn't be treated as the only viable way to manage the natural issues that Extract games have built into their gameplay loop. It's been over 7 years since Escape from Tarkov started using this band-aid, and at this point you can rightly describe it as a clutch. Like so many other issues going on with Tarkov, if they really wanted to fix it, they've had plenty of time to figure out how. So, to future devs and players giving feedback, let's not limit ourselves, we can do better. If you've enjoyed this video, give it a like and a comment. Subscribe for more. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, good hunting.